Headley and Constantine were the first cricket heroes to Black West Indians, and their achievements on the field inspired confidence that it was time too for political and social change.
What the cricket is really in fact doing, it is reflecting the desire of the community to say to Great Britain, we have been colonies for 300 years and the time has come to redefine our political relationship to Whitehall. Independence is in the air. The trade union movement is demanding the end to the colonial relationship. There is a middle class movement speaking of sovereignty, constitutional break with the British Parliament. So the cricket and the politics are intertwined.
Through the 1930s, demands for political independence and social reform gained momentum. As the white elite resisted, the situation became increasingly volatile, and a series of demonstrations and general strikes swept across the region. But any hope for change was put on hold with the outbreak of the Second World War.
Cable in the morning, send and tell them I am coming, so they better prepare for war. Cable in the morning, send and tell them I am coming, so they better prepare for war. Tell them murder, kill and slay, war declare at the break of day. On the lion and a
West Indians fought alongside British troops to defend the empire. But when the war ended, the soldiers returned to find that many Black West Indians still lived in poverty. One of those to grow up in these ghettos was batsman Everton Weeks from Barbados. The cricket he played there as a boy trained him to play his shots along the ground.
Actually, I was born just about 200 meters away from here, Kensington Oval, and I played most of my cricket in that corner there. The houses were very close together. If the ball went through somebody's window, you know, you were given out, sort of thing. That was one of the reasons why the ball was struck on the ground.
But as a poor boy from Bridgetown, Weeks had limited opportunity. Just as West Indian society was still divided between black and white, cricket clubs were also segregated. Clubs like the Wanderers in Barbados would remain exclusively whites only until the late 1950s.
It was not like South Africa. In fact, South Africa, I thought, would have been better, where you knew that you shouldn't walk on that side of the road. Here was a little more subtle. You weren't accepted in certain places.
Frustrated by this apartheid system, middle-class blacks set up their own organizations like the Empire Club, which was established in 1914. But they refused to admit players without professional qualifications. Weeks, who had left school at 14, was left with the option of joining the British Army to play cricket. After making his name as a batsman for the Army, he was called into the West Indies team when Test matches resumed in 1948.
That was one of the most delightful things that would have happened to me when I was asked to play for the West Indies.
And later that year, on a tour to India, Weeks set a record for West Indian batsmen, scoring 5 consecutive centuries. Now rated as the #1 batsman in the world, Weeks was part of the West Indies team which prepared to tour England in 1950.
London is the place for me. London, this lovely city. You can go to France or America, India, Asia or Australia, but you must come back to London City.
This tour held special significance, as 2 years earlier the SS Windrush sailed from Jamaica, bringing a first contingent of West Indians to Britain. Its arrival began an era of mass migration of West Indians looking for a new life in the mother country.
But this is the place I wanted to know. London, that's the place for me.
And West Indies cricket was also entering a new era. Although still led by a white captain, this team contained a new generation of black cricketers who would go on to dominate Caribbean cricket for the next decade. Weeks, along with fellow batsmen from Barbados Clyde Walcott and Frank Worrell, would become known as the 3 Ws.
And they make you feel like a millionaire. So London.
Those players were great players to watch. They were, all had their own style. They were different. Clyde Walcott played on the back foot, very strong on the back foot, very good hooker. Frank Worrell was stroke the ball, very stylish.
And for the first time, this team also represented the diverse cultures in the West Indies. Leg spinner Sonny Ramadan from Trinidad was the first cricketer of East Indian descent to play for the team. His presence was a breakthrough for the Indian communities in the Caribbean. They had been brought to the West Indies by Britain to work as indentured labour when slavery was abolished.
They had made significant achievements financially, economically, professionally, educationally, and so on. But to have a great West Indian player, that was the hope, the aspiration of every group in the West Indies.
But in the first test of the series, the West Indies were thoroughly outplayed by England, who condemned them to a crushing defeat.
Cricket, lovely cricket, at Lord's where I saw it. Cricket, lovely cricket.
1-0 down, the West Indies arrived for the second test at Lord's as definite underdogs.
Goddard won the test.
But Sonny Ramadan, bowling in tandem with off-spinner Alf Valentine, shocked England. They took 18 wickets between them, spinning the West Indies to their first victory on English soil.
The bowling was super fine.
Winning in England at Lord's in 1950, this had never been achieved, and I thought that was the highlight of my Test career.
When the final wicket fell, jubilant West Indian fans followed calypso musicians Lord Kitchener and Lord Beginner onto the field for a victory parade. Their song became an anthem for West Indies cricket, and the press now labelled the players calypso cricketers.
Jump without fear, so at Lord's was the scenery. It bound to go down in history. After all was said and done,
For the rest of the series, the three W's tormented the English bowlers. In the third test at Trent Bridge, Worrell and Weeks put on a record partnership of 283. They went on to win both this game and the final match to seal an historic 3-1 series victory.
It came at a time when West Indians were immigrating to England, and when they got there, they were struggling. So the West Indies team triumphing in England at that time was a great boost to West Indians in England. But it also was a great boost to the West Indian movement towards self-determination in the West Indies. At that time, politically, West Indies were moving towards independence from Britain.
In 1958, Britain agreed to grant federation status to the West Indies. The hope was that these disparate Caribbean territories could forge a political and economic union and eventually gain full independence as a single West Indian nation.
It was surely the greatest day in the history of Trinidad. All Port of Spain turned out in the intense heat to cheer Princess Margaret as Her Royal Highness slowly drove to the Red House to inaugurate the first federal legislature of the West Indies.
But while the road to self-government was now opening up, the cricket team carried on being led by a white captain. And it wasn't as if the West Indies had built on their epic victory in 1950. They had since suffered defeats to Australia and England, with only the three W's continuing to prove their status as world-class players. In 1957 at Trent Bridge, Frank Worrell's 191 not out was hailed as one of the finest innings seen in England since the war, but they still lost the series 3-0. Worrell, though, had emerged as a natural leader, and black West Indians now had a serious candidate for the captaincy.
There was a self-confidence that not only could they govern themselves, but in the equally important matter of West Indies cricket, they should captain themselves. We've come into the 1950s with many people being very bitter, especially beyond the boundary, where this political revolution had taken place, but there was still unfinished business on the field of play.